This is Supernatural Selection on DeviantBehaviorRadio.com, hosted by Kevin the Bastard.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the latest episode of Supernatural Selection. Again, I am Kevin the Bastard, and I am happy to have, once again with us, the Jack Hanna of the show, Mr. David Davis.
I prefer the title Not So Bastard, but I'll take Jack Hanna of the show as well.
Yeah, but I'm just so happy to have you back. You are so responsible for getting this show started. I am so happy to have you back. And we're going to talk about one of my favorite UFO incidents of all time, the Hopkinsville Goblins. Now, David, you're going to be presenting this episode, and I really appreciate that because this is like your bread and butter. This is your thing, right?
Yeah, I'm just kind of obsessed with this story. It's one of my all-time favorite UFO encounter stories. It's just there's so much going on. It's so cinematic. It's perfect.
Oh, absolutely. It is a fantastic story. It would make a great movie. I'm a little surprised it hasn't been turned into a movie or an episode of The X-Files at some point in the past.
It was an episode of the Project Blue Book show that was on History Channel for a season.
Oh, I've got to check that show out, man. I know it's about J. Allen Hynek and someone else.
Yeah, I think the guy who plays Littlefinger from Game of Thrones plays J. Allen Hynek.
Oh, really?
I think so.
Oh, that's amazing. I can't wait to check that out.
Yeah, we'll have to give that a try.
Yeah, but I've been obsessed with the idea of checking out that show because I love J. Allen Hynek because he's just one of those dudes that started out as a skeptic. He invented the swamp gas excuse and then looked at the ones he couldn't solve and was like, maybe there's something going on here.
It's more than swamp gas.
It's definitely not that swamp gas. So, David, let's talk about these Hopkinsville Goblin boys.
Alright, so what do you know about them? Just real quick.
Oh, I know quite a bit. It's basically a siege situation where a family was hanging out playing cards, and they saw a meteor. Somebody saw a meteor, and then goblins showed up and started attacking the house. And they showed up in town talking to the sheriff, and the sheriff was like, "Well, these guys are obviously scared."
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
it's definitely one of the more interesting UFO invasion stories.
Yeah, you pretty much hit the nail on the head with it. I also compare it to Waco. We could call it UF Waco.
That's great. I love it.
So, yeah, basically the Hopkinsville Goblins, there's a bunch of names for this incident, but they're part of what's been called the Kelly-Hopkinsville encounter, although it's also been called the Hopkinsville Goblin case and the Kelly Green Man case. But the Green Man thing is a separate thing. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But what it was is this close encounter event in 1955, somewhere between the unincorporated township of Kelly and the town of Hopkinsville in Christian County in Kentucky. So this is a South story, and all the characters are very much in line with what you would expect from Kentucky, which is fantastic.
Oh, God, no. I love the idea of all these. I mean, here's the thing. As, people always talk about, rednecks being, these unreliable sources. I'm like, dude, this is perfect because they don't really have the intelligence and imagination to make this stuff up.
Mm-hmm. And that'll play out, not to insult all people in Kentucky.
Oh, absolutely not.
That'll play out in the story as well. So, this case is particularly important to ufologists, because it's one of those most highly documented, close encounter situations. And it's also, in popular culture and ufology, it's the codifier of that little green man trope. But, again, we're going to have to kind of get into that because these things were not green. So, we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely get into that because it's funny how stuff will evolve like that. It's like a game of telephone.
And so the reason the story is cool to me is that it's entirely a siege story. It's like a Hollywood film. This family being attacked at their homestead by aliens for several hours. Just a fantastic narrative that someone really needs to capitalize on.
Oh, I swear to God, man, it's amazing. It reminds me of the sequel to E.T. that they were working on, where it's called, like, I think it was like Night Siege or something. It was about aliens attacking the house, and E.T. shows up to rescue them. And it's the same general idea, and I really think someone needs to capitalize on this, like your idea for the comic script with, like, the pickled alien arm. That's just, like, such a great idea. It's like, like I said last time, you gotta kiss the arm if you don't take a sip of that there whiskey.
Well, and you know what's funny is I was kind of writing this episode. I was also thinking about that potential like story and like trying to figure out a way to get the people into the mines to deal with like the silver object. And I have some ideas, so I'll talk to you about that later. But definitely, like,
Oh, great!
I think we need to collaborate on this because
I'd love to.
Yeah. So my main source for this episode is a book, more of a report, Close Encounter at Kelly and Others of 1955 by Isabel Davis and Ted Blecker. I also kind of like went to history.com and a few other websites just for like an overview and to make sure that I was getting the order of events right. But most of my research is pulled from that incident report by Isabel Davis and Ted Blecker. And I'll talk a little bit about the origins of that in a bit as well.
Yeah, and this is a great case to go over because there is so much information about it. There's like direct sources, there's like these stories that came out afterwards that say they're like, oh, there's like 14 of these guys, and there's only like maybe 4 of them. So
you know, and the other thing is like with the big cases in ufology, like number 1 you have Mothman. But, like, close to it, with number 2, it would probably be this Kelly Hopkinsville incident. It's just one of those, like, if you have a pantheon of the greatest cases, at least these 2 are, like, right there at the top.
Yeah.
So do we want to start getting into the incident?
Oh, absolutely. Let's get going on this thing, because this is something people need to know about, and I just want to go ahead and restate that, like, our first episode was 30 minutes, but, like, these episodes will go on as long as they have to. So, you know, we're just going to go into this and see how long this goes.
Yeah, I want to tell the story, like, as completely as I can, because it is, like, an incredible story. I love this story and retelling it.
I absolutely adore this story.
Alright, so the first reports of the incident occurred in the evening of August 21st, 1955, at the Hopkinsville police station around 11 o'clock at night. So what happened was, at the police station, this agitated Sutton family, the name of the family was the Sutton family, they arrived at the station and they just started ranting at the officers, telling the officers their stories.
Which is great, because one of the things that the officers said about this, and this is one of the reasons why this one sticks out to me, unlike, say, some of the other UFO cases, these guys actually were terrified about something. The police officers said specifically, these guys experienced something that scared all of them.
Yeah.
And that is the most important thing. These guys were not acting. They had something happen to them.
Yeah, and just imagine, you're working 11 o'clock at night, and it's probably a pretty slow police station. All of a sudden, like, 12 people burst in and just, like, screaming about, like, little goblin-type things.
Holy crap, that is like, you're going to be talking about that for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Honestly.
So, about the family, like, the family, as I mentioned, there were at least 12 people involved in this, like, what they call this family unit. So the Sutton family was very large. There were about 5 adults and 7 children who were witnesses to the event at the farmhouse. So the family, like the term family, I don't know if it's necessarily like a misnomer, because it was kind of like 2 different families living together, it seems.
And that's the thing about broods. They always end up being like multiple families, but you go with one name because, holy crap, who wants to keep track of all that?
You know what? You're so right. I wish I would remember the word broods, because that is like the perfect description for this, and it also fits in with Kentucky.
Yeah.
So part of the whole Sutton brood was the Langfords. Now, the Langfords, that family was headed by the matriarch, who was a widow, Glennie Langford. And she had her kids, Lonnie, Charlton, and Mary, who were, I think, like 7, 9, and 12, accordingly. You also had Glennie's two sons from a previous marriage, who were like the Suttons, specifically, like the titular Suttons.
Yeah.
This included Elmer Lucky Sutton and his wife Vera, and John Charlie J.C. Sutton and his wife Aline.
Okay, first off, I just need to say that you know you're in trouble when your primary witness is named Lucky.
And the other thing is, like, with a name like Lucky, you expect him to be missing, like, a toe or a finger or something.
Oh my god, yeah, no. Hi, his name's Lucky. He done chopped down so many trees and ain't died. But, like, one of the things that I really want to point out real quick about about Glennie is that Glennie, and this is going to come up later, Glennie did not allow alcohol in her house. She was a teetotaler.
Now that being said, like, even though she didn't allow alcohol, this is Kentucky. This is rural Kentucky. So, like...
Yeah, okay, maybe somebody drank a beer before they came in. But I have a feeling if somebody came into Glennie's house and was drunk, she would have kicked their ass out of the house.
Now, see, I could see someone, like, storing a bottle of something in a tree nearby. You know what I mean?
Sure, yeah. But, they're not, like... super sauced at any rate.
Yeah, there was no real evidence of... Well, we'll get into that later, but yeah, it's important to know
let's move on.
Yeah. So, also, there was Aline's brother, O.P. Baker. I'm not sure what the O and P stand for. And then lastly, there were two people who were visiting, the Taylors, Billy Ray and his wife, June.
Billy Ray, not related to Billy Ray Cyrus. You know what, I'm just going to go ahead and say that OP stands for Opie Parker Baker.
That sounds incredibly on the nose, so that's probably what it was.
Yeah, let's just go with that. Opie Parker and the Taylors, Billy Ray and June.
And what I appreciated in the story, like, the two main characters are Lucky and Billy Ray, which are just absolutely fantastic. Names for Kentucky protagonists.
It is so Kentucky, it's ridiculous.
So, we talk about, this whole thing being so Kentucky. So the homestead was very much like 1950s rural Kentucky. We're talking about, like, a 3-room house. And there was no running water, there was no telephone, radio, no television, or books, because, books are Satan's vessel.
Oh, obviously. I mean, that's a given. And to be honest, and this is going to sound kind of horrifying, this sounds a lot like my grandmother's house.
I was going to say, this also sounds like places in Kentucky today still.
It sounds like Mississippi today, because my grandmother didn't have, like, power until someone insists you need ceiling fans or we're all going to die. And that was sometime in, like, the 70s.
And I don't want to, like, make fun of them for not having books, too much, but also, like, you could put books in a house and not have to use power or anything.
Yeah.
So...
yeah, I mean, come on, the Bible's a book.
Yeah, like, I wonder if there was even a Bible there. Probably there was.
I don't know. Maybe they just passed it down, oral history, and I don't know. It's kind of weird.
So, another way to kind of, like, describe this family, I have a quote from Police Chief Russell Greenwell, who was the guy at the station when they arrived at 11 o'clock at night screaming their heads off. And this is what he said about the type of people the Suttons were. He said, quote, "These aren't the kind of people who normally run to the police for help. What they do is reach for their guns," end quote.
Oh my god.
So yeah, good old country folks. You can see where this is going, with the mention of guns.
Oh my god, there's a still somewhere on this property, I guarantee you. Maybe Glennie doesn't know about it, but there's a still on this property.
Yeah, I mean with the young men on the property, like, it wouldn't surprise me if they were, like, brewing up some hooch somewhere.
Oh my god, yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, that's probably some pretty good hooch.
Oh yeah, definitely. So, getting back to kind of like the narrative at hand, describing the incident, the Suttons claim that around 7 p.m. on Sunday evening, a family friend, 20-year-old Billy Ray Taylor, went out to get water from a well. Mm-hmm. And regarding Billy Ray, he was visiting from Pennsylvania with his wife June, and the reason he knew the family was that he worked with Lucky Sutton at a carnival.
Oh my god. Can we talk about the fact that it had to be carnies?
No judgments.
No judgments, but like seriously, this is some traveling people of questionable moral fiber traveling around, setting up like deadly rides and scammy stuff, and then of course they see the aliens.
Mm-hmm. And that I think that carny background definitely factors into what happens after the event. But we'll talk about that later.
Oh yes, please.
So what happens is Billy Ray Taylor is out at the well getting some water, and while he's doing this, he sees what he described as a silvery object that was, quote, real bright with an exhaust all the colors of the rainbow, end quote. So what does this remind you of?
Meow 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 meow. That's Neon Cat.
Yep, it's definitely Neon Cat. So yeah, I'm picturing this like football shaped silver meteor with like a rainbow trail behind it. Very prog rock cover, if you will.
Yeah, that's it. You know what? I'd actually like to see that just for my own mental well-being, to know that something that beautiful could be in the universe.
Yeah. So he sees this like this flying silvery object with like this rainbow colored exhaust, and then he apparently watches it like move over the house, passes over it, and then just stops in midair, and then it just drops to the ground.
Alright, not to be offensive to the aliens, but that kind of sounds like their engine died and they just dropped.
Which reframes the entire story as these guys just trying to get help and the locals shooting at them.
I know, it really does. It sounds like, hey man, do y'all have any like some uranium or anything? Get off my lawn!
You got some jumper cables? So, one thing I want to point out with this is that it's kind of similar to a lot of UFO sightings where the motion of the UFO kind of breaks the understood mechanics of flight during that time. So, when you talk about like old school 1950s UFOs, the motion, sounds like more modern like helicopters or even those jets with those vertical takeoff abilities.
Yeah, it's really interesting that, like, all these UFOs really have this bizarre experience, like, this bizarre ability to just, like, completely defy physics. Well, I get that.
It's kind of like one-upmanship, because every time we develop something, probably from repurposed alien technology, we start getting UFOs to do even crazier shit. Like, how like, modern UFOs, like, we have jets, which are fantastically complex and maneuverable, but the modern UFO sightings do like really weird, impossible stuff.
They really do, and we're gonna get into this later, but this really kind of goes into the Looney Tunes logic of a lot of this stuff.
Of course, and then this situation with the UFO is also in line with like a rash of UFO sightings over like the previous 5 or so years. In our source text, Isabel Davis mentions like, in early 1955, reports about a series of UFO encounters in South America that began to roll in. I think do you recall anything going on?
Yes, I do. I remember some alien abductions happening in the 1950s in South America. There was one gentleman in particular whose name escapes me that was abducted and completely sexed up by aliens.
So he's like Randy Quaid in Independence Day.
Yeah, well, sort of. It's kind of like more of a porn parody of Independence Day when you get down to it, because it's like, hey, you. And I love the description of the guy getting abducted, because like the alien woman and him get it on, and she gets up and she's like rubbing her belly with like this yummy thing, and then points up, and he's
so
like,
good.
Oh, it's so good. Give me more of your loving, Mr. Man. And then they like take off, and he's like, hey, come back, man. I want more.
She used him for his love yogurt, or his earth yogurt.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, can you imagine you're just sitting there in a field naked going, hey, come back sometime. I really like that. That was some shit, man. I'm down.
So I'm not sure why you're going with that voice, but we'll just run with it.
Well, it was South America. So I just kind of, I'm sorry, I apologize, but like, it's definitely like, I don't know, I must shut up. So.
Okay. So, the important thing about this Kelly incident, it's also not the first reported sighting of, like, little humanoids either.
This is true.
Yeah, many of these incidents feature creatures who are similar to the Hopkinsville Goblins. I think there was one in eastern Kentucky or something where a woman had to, like, swerve off the road because some of these things were walking across the road or something.
And there have been so many reports in the 50s of little green dudes with big noses, just like aggravating motorists.
So, Billy Ray, like, he returns into the house immediately, I assume. Like immediately just kind of, like, drops the bucket. You just kind of see that visual play out in your head where he's just standing there, he's got a bucket of water, and then just, like, drops, and he just walks away.
Oh, yeah, no, I can totally picture this.
So, he goes inside, tells everybody what he saw. Nobody believes him. Everybody just kind of laughs it off, right? So, and about an hour or so later, the family dog starts barking. So Billy Ray and Lucky, our two heroes, decide to, check it out. What's going on with the dog? Looking out their back door, they then see a strange glow and a small humanoid creature standing in that, like, radiating field of glowing.
Now, before we move on with the rest of this narrative, I really want to point out that, again, these are two Kentucky natives that have just seen something come down in the sky, and then there's, like, a short dude in the woods.
We talked about high strangeness last time you and I were talking about stuff, and there's a lot of that in this story as well. Now, as far as how the creature is described, the figure seemed to be about 3.5 feet tall, with a quote oversized head, almost perfectly round, arms extended almost to the ground, hands had talons, and its oversized eyes glowed with yellowish light, unquote. They also said that the body shivered like a silver metal, and then later drawings by the witnesses would also include large, pointed ears, giving them that kind of, like, goblin appearance. And, like, if you look at the illustrations, like, the illustrations are fantastic. I love the look of these things.
Oh, there are so many great illustrations by these people.
Yeah. So, they see this, like, little humanoid thing standing in front of, like, a glowing field, so their first impulse is to grab their guns. They had a 20-gauge shotgun and a .22 rifle.
I don't know what that thing is, but it ain't breathing my air.
Exactly.
God damn, that is insane. I mean, like, this is like your first experience with an alien species, and, like, their first experience with humans, and your immediate response is, that thing has to die.
Well, I don't blame them, because I'd get freaked out. If I had a gun, I'd at least have the gun on me. I mean,
I'll say this, if I'm living in rural Kentucky with a gun, yeah, okay, sure, I'm gonna shoot the fuck out of that thing.
It's, I understand grabbing the guns, but it's just also very, very, very funny to think about. That's the first impulse, which I get, but it's also, we can also laugh at that.
Yeah, no, totally.
Alright, so now here's where things start getting into that, like, high strangeness territory.
Which is my favorite fucking subject. We're gonna get into that more toward the end, because I've got some ideas about this.
And how would you describe high strangeness for the listener?
High strangeness is like things stop reacting the way you expect them, and they kind of take on this Looney Tunes quality, in that things don't react the way physics would dictate. Like, let's say, oh, I don't know, you shoot at something, and it bounces off, and they start acting like Daffy Duck.
Okay, so now we're getting ahead here, but let me go ahead and go through this part, because
please do.
This moment is incredible.
It's amazing.
So this little figure starts approaching the back door, and they fire at it. They say it seemed to have, like, its hands raised in the air, kind of like it was being held at gunpoint. You can kind of see it, like, its hands up, like, hands up, hi.
I come in peace, please do not shoot me with your gun.
And then, like, it was being held up at gunpoint. It's like, well, yeah, no shit, because you have it held up at gunpoint.
You got a fucking 28-gauge shotgun pointed at this thing. Of course, it's like, don't shoot.
So yeah, they eventually they say that it does this, like, weird little flip and then flees into the darkness. So I wonder if, like, when they shot it, it kind of, like, flipped in the air like a cartoon character. You know what I mean? It's like, because they say the creatures were impervious to bullets. But yeah, I just picture this, like, thing standing there, like in a Looney Tunes cartoon, and then ping! It launches into the air, does a little flip. It's ridiculous.
No, absolutely. If you replace Daffy Duck in this situation, I wouldn't bat an eye. I mean, in the versions of this I've heard, they shot at it, it bounced off, and in my head, it's going, hoo, 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 and bounces off like Daffy Duck.
Yeah, now, see, when I hear it, when I read about it scuttling off, I just think like Zoidberg from Futurama.
Oh, exactly. Yes, no. It's like squatting down. It's got its hands up, clapping. Just...
So, they say these things were impervious to bullets. So a bit later, they see another one of them appear at a side window at the house. So naturally, they fire at it from inside through the screen.
Oh, yeah, no. I'm doing the same thing.
Yeah. At that point, you have to. It's coming up to your window.
Yeah.
So again, they hit it, and it does that little flip thing. And then Mrs. Lanford eventually, she also describes that another one approached the door. I wasn't sure if they shot that one too, but my guess is probably, and probably the same situation happened.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and say that a local neighbor actually reported that during this incident he heard at least 4 or 5 gunshots. And there may have been more during this, but we're not positive because, the guy eventually went inside and was like, well, they're obviously shooting at bobcats.
Well, and that's also part of the reason, the police, came eventually after being, contacted by the Sutton family at the stations because there were these reports of gunfire. Someone had thought there might have been some sort of local dispute or something like that. So eventually Billy Ray steps outside and the house, there's not really a porch, but there's this overhang where the roof overhangs over the side of the house. So he steps out under that. Now he doesn't notice, but a couple of the people inside said that they saw a small hand reach down and touch him, and a couple of the descriptions I read suggest that they grabbed his hair.
Mm-hmm.
So they freak the hell out and pull Taylor back, and then Lucky starts firing at the overhang.
Yeah, let me tell you, man, there is a fantastic illustration of his hair being grabbed by one of these things on the overhang, and this is straight out of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. This is absolutely horrifying looking stuff because look on the dude's face and the thing just grabbing his hair gotcha, motherfucker. It's amazing.
Well, and you just think about that cinematically, and you can see the scene in the movie where he's just standing on this overhang and you see this tiny little clawed hand reaching down from the top of the screen behind him.
Absolutely.
It's just there's so many wonderful visuals baked into the story.
Yeah.
So Lucky starts taking a shot. He took a shot at the overhang, and then he noticed another one of the creatures in a tree and shot at it. So these things are apparently all over.
Yeah.
Well, what was interesting this time, and we have another case of this high strangeness, is that after he shot the one in the tree, it seemed to float down to the ground and then scamper off.
Can I just say that the word scamper is highly appropriate because I really just picture these things acting like children as they're doing this.
And that's actually kind of a pretty good description. When we get into the larger nature of ufology and these extra-dimensional potential beings, they sometimes take on childlike forms and have childlike behaviors. So,
yeah.
And plus this little 3-foot tall big-eared goblin thing kind of scampering off in the woods is just incredibly adorable to me.
I know, and I think that's why, we'll come to that later. We'll talk about that later. I've got something in mind specifically, but I know you mentioned this later, so let's move on.
Okay, so from here, the incident kind of slows down a little bit. The family decides to just stay inside the house, hopefully riding out whatever this is. And this is...
I think that's called common sense, actually.
Exactly. And this is for a few hours, and all the while they're in their house, they keep hearing scratches on the roof.
Imagine that for a second. Imagine you're in your little rural house, you've got a hurricane lantern in the kitchen where you've been playing poker, and you're terrified. There's these... You've shot at these creatures, and then you just hear them crawling around on the roof for 4 for hours.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing is like, yeah, they didn't have electricity, so there's like not a whole lot of light, so you're essentially sitting there in the dark. I know that they probably had like hurricane lanterns, but you're sitting there in the dark and you just hear scratching in the walls, and it's like very Lovecraftian.
Yeah, this is literally the most terrifying situation I could picture myself being in.
Yeah, it absolutely terrifying. So like eventually they give up, and they make a dash for their cars and drive off to the police station around 11 p.m.
Yeah, and that's they were in the unincorporated community of Kelly, and they drive all the way to Hopkinsville. So that's like a decent amount of time.
Right. They arrive at the police station, the 12 people like freaking the hell out and telling the story. So Police Chief Greenwell calls for backup, and eventually like state police, military police from Fort Campbell, and a photographer from the local paper, the Kentucky New Era, kind of arrive at the house to investigate that night.
Mm-hmm.
And they find like shell casings, but little else. No sign of the goblins, no footprints, no scratches on the roof.
Mm-hmm.
But what they do, they don't find like signs of drinking. Which is important for a situation like this. If people tell
Absolutely.
you, if we saw goblins, like, okay, so how much have you had to drink?
Yeah.
That being said, Davis and Blecker's report, our source for this episode, would later kind of contradict these claims.
As I said, yeah, definitely. The matriarch of this brood was a teetotaler, and she would not allow alcohol on her land. Now, they did say they found, like, 2 beer cans of indeterminate age, which means somebody had, like, a beer, which you're not going to hallucinate goblins on, like, 1 can of Budweiser.
Right, and also, like, I don't know how large this homestead was. I'd imagine it fairly sizable. So it could have been like a local kid going out into a field to have a beer.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, they didn't say it was, like, near the house. They just said they found a couple of cans of beer. And also, this is, like you said, it's going to be a sizable homestead because, like, these people are, like, kind of self-sustaining because they're rural. They've got farmland. They probably have some livestock. They probably have a garden. And there's got to be enough room for all that.
Exactly. So, they don't find a whole lot of evidence when they check out the place. But one element that kind of helps to corroborate the story was the drawing, were the drawings that they had the adult witnesses do. Now,
absolutely.
So the thing about the drawings is they were all quite similar, but the most important factor in this was the fact that, like, when the drawings were done, the men were separated from the rest of the family because the men were away from the farmhouse, like, for hours dealing with the police. So the idea of, like, them being able to coordinate with family back home about what these things looked like seems kind of far-fetched. Now,
agreed.
That being said, a skeptic could argue that they had decided on the appearance before they went to the police, but we're not going to be skeptical about this because that's no fun.
Definitely not, because these are not highly educated people. They have been living in a rural area. They're not terribly imaginative, and they were panicked. I mean, like, if you've planned out, well, here's what the aliens are going to look like. You're going to go in and be like, oh no, we done saw some aliens that attacked our house. These people were in an absolute panic. I can't imagine there was a lot of panic going on with this. Maybe pants shitting, but not but not planning. And they had to try to keep the kids calm. There were children here.
Yeah. And the other thing,
they had a lot going on.
They certainly were not improv comedians because there's no way they could have, like, yes-anded their way into a description.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? It had big ears and big eyes. Yeah, there was no opportunity for that.
Now, the thing that gets me, and we'll get into more of this later, is they're all the same general shape, like you said, short, long arms, big round heads, glowing yellow eyes, and big goblin ears. But some of the drawings have noses.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to get into that later because I want to talk about the super spectrum a little bit, but we'll get into that later.
Of course. So, the police and the associated law enforcement entities that were there, they kind of conduct their look and then they leave.
Yeah. Now, they did find that the family had shot through the screens, of course. There was evidence that they had fired on something.
So, after the police left, the Sutton family kind of, obviously still freaked out, were at their homestead, and they made claims that around 2:30 in the morning, the creatures returned, but then shortly after that, all activity ceased.
Yeah, now let's talk about that return at 2:30, because I saw some more information about this. Imagine this. You're done with the law enforcement, they all leave, everything's calmed down, and some sense of normality is returned to the house. And the matriarch is like, well, fuck all this, I'm going to bed. And she lays down. And she's trying to sleep, and she opens her eyes. And then there's this glowing fucking goblin just staring in the window at her.
Just tapping at the window with his little paw saying, I live, bitch.
Hey, how you doing? You okay in there? And she freaks out. And from what I understand, somebody ran in with a shotgun and pointed it at the window, and the thing ran off. And I'm not going to lie, that is the most terrifying part of this entire thing, when you think it's over, and then there's one right there in the window like, you're not done with me.
And that would be like, in the movie, that would be like that perfect ending, where it's just like, okay.
Oh, God.
And then, like the thing, like the guy comes in with the gun, the thing scampers off, and then the guy and Mrs. Sutton are just kind of, or Mrs. Langford are just looking at each other, and then like smash cut to the credits.
Oh, yeah, no. We ain't never going to be done with this. I can hear that.
Oh, man. So
we got to write this shit.
So that's the basic story of the encounter itself. So let's talk a little bit about the aftermath. So this wasn't the only invasion the Suttons dealt with. They were besieged by tourists, the media, and mystery-seeking nerds like you and me.
Yeah.
So the thing about these people were basically like forcing their way onto the Sutton property, and then would go and like insult them, calling them like ignorant or saying that they were trying to scam people, that kind of entitled behavior that people engage in when it comes to stuff like this.
All them carpetbaggers showing up from the north.
Yep. But also, it didn't necessarily help that perception of them when they started charging admission to the property. So what they would do is they would charge about 50 cents to enter the property, $1 to hear the story, and about $10 to take a picture. But my question is, take a picture of what?
I don't know what they're taking pictures of other than holes in the screen. But here's the thing, I'm not really mad at them. These people are obviously private. They're living rurally. They don't have a lot of people come out except for family and friends. And their privacy starts getting invaded by these dipshits, and they don't want any attention. They're kind of lucky they didn't get shot at by the Suttons, to be honest.
Especially given like how paranoid they probably were, because they were isolated and had to deal with this shit. I can imagine some idiot like walking up to their place at like 11 o'clock at night. Hey, are you guys the Goblin people?
Yeah, oh my God. There'd be a shotgun in his mouth. It'd be like something out of, we keep bringing up Looney Tunes. It'd be like, you're gonna leave.
So, so the Suttons kind of dealt with some backlash regarding that. But also, part of the aftermath is that, like, the incident grew in notoriety, but it kind of morphed into the origin of that little green man type of story.
That's what I love about this, is that it's the origin of that phrase.
Yeah, because you have all this local lore, and, things get mixed up, wires are crossed, and the Kelly incident got conflated with, like, another story around the same time involving a tall green man and a flying saucer. So it's just one of those things where it's like, all the stuff just blends together.
Yeah, And it's kind of understandable at the time. Like today, we can look up specific information on like Wikipedia or YouTube or wherever. But like now, like then, it's much more difficult because I mean, all you have is newspaper reports and eyewitness accounts.
Mm-hmm. And Kentucky newspapers, which
Oh my God, yeah.
dubious at best.
Yes, Kentucky newspapers back then.
There we go. So, another part of this aftermath was the incident also caught the attention of the Blue Book, the Project Blue Book program. And according to the incident report inside the Project Blue Book notes, they didn't really follow up on the event, mostly just checking with the Fort Campbell team. And, at least not officially, because this report by Isabel Davis and Ted Blecker, it was eventually published by our good friend J. Allen Hynek.
Yeah, and let's talk about J. Allen for a second. Mr. Hynek, fantastic researcher, eventually turned over a new leaf and became like a believer in the concept of UFOs because of the small percentage he couldn't explain, but this was old school J. Allen Hynek, the inventor of the concept of swamp gas being illuminated. And I saw a thing about this, and he literally heard about the Hopkinsville thing, and he more or less called this a load of bullshit and washed his hands of it because he said this is too uncredible to investigate. This is obviously a bunch of drunk rednecks. I'm not touching this.
Right. Oh, and then another weird thing about the situation was that there's some indiscrepancies with the military presence at the time, because the military police on site that was called for assistance was the Air Force, but Fort Campbell was an Army base. So
here's a question.
Mm-hmm.
Was this before it was the Air Force, or was this during the time that it was the Army Air Force?
That I don't quite know, but I think the Air Force, like, after World War II, materialized pretty quickly, didn't it?
Probably so. Which, that is really freaking weird.
Which makes you wonder if perhaps, like, maybe it could have been, like, the Men in Black or something. But there's no,
If it was Men in Black, it was legit Men in Black in the sense that it was government suits showing up. Not like the weird Tulpa guys that show up and are like, what is that pen? Can I have that pen?
And then if that was the case, if you're more conspiracy-minded, like we can sometimes be, like,
yes,
maybe the fact that these weren't necessarily military police, but perhaps CIA, and then perhaps there's a reason the Project Blue Book said it was a hoax or it wasn't, like, legitimate, was because they're trying to, like, keep the legitimacy of this event buried or something like that. It's just, for those of us who are more conspiracy-minded.
Mm-hmm.
So, in that regard, this Kelly Hopkinsville incident, like, went down in popular culture and UFO lore as a major, major component. And one of those, like, little modern day aftershocks of this is the charming little Kelly Little Green Men Days Festival, which promises, quote, food, fun, aliens, end quote. So unfortunately, the 2020 festival was a casualty of our current pandemic, but it looks like this August they should be back doing their little festival.
Why is it every time we do this I want to take a road trip? These sound like so much fun.
Yeah.
I want to do this and the Mothman Festival. I mean, there's going to be good food and people in stupid costumes.
Oh yeah, it's great. I mean, I was looking it up and, like, they get, like, little, like, cardboard sunglasses that have alien features on them. They have, like, an alien that dresses up and walks around. They have, like, a local cosplay community come up and dresses like the Mandalorian and all that stuff.
That's awesome. I bet it's like the 501st.
Yeah, it just looks like so much fun, and I would love to do something like that. Like, I want to do I want to do a road trip where it's just, let's go to these weird frickin' festivals for ufology and like high strangeness encounters.
Absolutely. I cannot tell you how much I want to go to one of these things. It sounds like so much fun.
Yeah, they got like live music and food and everything. It's great.
I know, it's just so freaking amazing. We'll figure it out. We're going to do this one day. I promise. We're going to do this, and we're going to record, like, live at the thing.
Like, I think you could probably do an entire fun episode where it's just, here are all these weird little festivals that crop up around these weird supernatural and, cryptid encounters.
Oh, absolutely. You and me, buddy, we're going to do this.
Plan out the road trip, give people an itinerary, like, figure out what dates, so make sure you can, like, hit them all, and see if anyone's willing to take that challenge, because that's incredible. As far as other pop culture references, obviously, like, the whole Little Green Man thing, we talked about the History Channel's Project Blue Book show, but also, one of my favorite Pokemon, Sableye, is based on the Hopkinsville Goblins.
I noticed that. I saw a lot when I did a search for images of the Hopkinsville Goblins to explain this to one of my coworkers. Sableye kept coming up, and I was like, "Holy crap! I forgot about that." And the Japanese are obsessed with American UFO stuff. Like, there are so many pop culture things they do of like the Hopkinsville Goblins and like the Flatbush Monster and all that stuff.
And it's
amazing.
And only most of it is porn. So I think statistically you'll find some good stuff. But it's also kind of cool. Like they really kind of like paid attention to like the creature when they designed it, because the shiny version of the Pokemon is green.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so they're doing like that, like the Little Green Man thing. The Kelly Hopkinsville incident is also kind of important for like skeptics as well. It gained notoriety as part of a major paper titled "Hauntings, Homeopathy, and Hopkinsville Goblins Using Pseudoscience to Teach Scientific Thinking" by Rodney Schmaltz and Scott Lilienfeld. It was published in Frontiers in Psychology in 2014, and it's a paper meant to teach about like skepticism without diving into cynicism. Like, I've read it, and it's a good paper, and I think there's good lessons. But it's definitely skeptical.
Well, that's nice, but you're asking me to trust a man named Schmaltz.
Now, see, I love Schmaltz because it makes for the best French fries.
I was going to say, I would love to have some beer that has been made with Schmaltz.
Let's talk a little bit about the theories of what these things were. So we have the theory that they are aliens, or they could be like other dimensional entities, if you believe that like aliens are from other dimensions.
Now, when we talk, we need to specify there is the nuts and bolts UFOs, which are actual ships from outer space, and then there is the concept of ultra-terrestrials, which is other dimensional beings. We're going to get into a little bit of that as we go on.
So, as far as theories as to what happened during the incident and what these things were, there are a few that are pretty predictable. So in about 2006, Joe Nickel, a senior research fellow at the International Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, also a spoil sport, published an article titled "Siege of the Little Green Men, the 1955 Kelly, Kentucky Incident." So one of the things that he kind of points out in that article is that, based on reports of sightings of UFOs around the time of the Kelly incident, he proposes that Billy Taylor had seen a small meteor when he talks about the silver object in the sky, like, that floated over the house. Nichols seems to be suggesting that maybe it would have just been a meteor.
I could see that. I'm not going to lie. I could totally see that being a thing. But also, it's too big of a coincidence to have these creatures show up after a meteor.
Right.
It's just too... It's too perfect.
Right. And then another thing, like, Nickel unimaginatively suggests the aliens were possibly birds. 9 times out of 10, if there's a cryptid, someone's going to say, oh, it was a bird. It was a sand crane.
Specifically an owl.
Yeah. So specifically, he said the great horned owl. Now, in his defense, the great horned owls tend to be very large birds, and their features can be matched up with the depicted elements of the goblins. We're talking like the horns can easily be misinterpreted as ears.
I did watch a video of that, and I can get behind that idea, especially with the owl's eyes glowing yellow. I can get behind that.
That and like the size of their wings, that would make them look like they have long arms.
Mm-hmm.
So, skeptic author Brian Dunning said, quote, "There are simply too many similarities between the creatures reported by the families and an aggressive pair of the local great horned owls, which do stand about 2/3 of a meter tall," unquote.
Mm-hmm. I did hear that they could have mistaken the house as like a nest, saying that they were attacking the nest, trying to drive off the intruders, which I'm like, okay, I could see that. Like, if I were not completely out of my mind, I could see that.
Like, honestly, it's reasonable, but also it's not very fun.
No, it's not fun at all, and it doesn't really, like, what are the odds of a meteor and then owl showing up on the same night?
Oh, we know that it could have at least happened once.
Sure. Okay, once. But, that's, like you said, that's not fun.
But a couple of, like, super aggressive owls also seems kind of fun, too. Just these owls just going crazy and being dicks to these people in this house.
That'd make a good movie, too, Night of the Owl.
Night of the Owl. It's a real hoot. So another thing that was mentioned was, we talk about like the glowing that was seen during the night. Some of it could be attributed to foxfire, which is a bioluminescent fungus. Now, I've never like seen foxfire. I've heard of it. You're in that area. Have you ever seen like foxfire?
All right, I am 45 years old. I've grown up in the South. My family is from rural Mississippi, and I have never in my life seen foxfire. And the idea of both a meteor, owls, and the owls happening to be covered in a glow-in-the-dark fungus is BS to me.
Well, see, when they talk about the silvery sheen on the owls, they're talking about reflecting moonlight. The glowing fungus would be like that aura that was like behind when you first saw.
You know what? I'd love to, on some level, be the voice of reason like you were with the Mothman, but I don't buy it. I just don't buy it. There's like more coincidence involved in it being owls and a meteor than just fucking goblins.
It's definitely like in trying to explain it, you have to like throw in all these other like weird coincidences, and it's like, it seems like the simpler alternative is more complex than the initial answer.
It really is.
And then of course there's always the theory, we have J. Allen Hynek, so there's the theory of swamp gas.
Alright, look, there's not enough swamps in Kentucky to verify the swamp gas.
Well, I guess my question...
shut that out.
I guess my question is, did they have an outhouse? Because maybe like the outhouse leaked and that made the swamp? I don't know.
I can only imagine there is an outhouse, but like, I don't know. Well, okay, it's like, what was it, 12 people?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they shit enough.
Oh my god. And then like the last theory that I kind of like pulled up, but I found absolutely fascinating is that... Oh,
I love this.
Like, I couldn't track down a ton of information, I just found a few passing references. But the Suttons might have seen a small chimp that was that had like arrived in a crashed test rocket.
Okay, see, the explanation I had was that it was from a carnival, which, if that's true, look, we need to go back for a second. These guys met as carnies, right?
Mm-hmm.
They know monkeys. They know monkeys, they know chimps, they know gorillas, they know all that kind of stuff. I don't think that they're going to mistake a monkey for an alien. They're going to be like, why is one of them? They're chimps. Let's bring him in and get him drunk.
Right. It's just... If it were an ape of some sort, they would have known it.
Yeah, and my fiance actually said when I was talking about this with Mike, she was like, I feel so bad for that monkey. And I was like, it's okay, they were goblins. Yeah, I feel like we really need to go over the fact that, like, this really sounds, and I keep bringing this up, like the super spectrum, like the goblin dimension, as it were. The world Mangonia, which if you have not read Passport to Mangonia by Jacques Vallée, I highly recommend it because it links UFOs to the fairy folk.
Mm-hmm.
And it talks about the idea of one reality folding over another reality, which causes the high strangeness. The super spectrum basically folded over this property, which explains the goblin's bizarre behavior, why no scratches were found on the roof,
Yeah.
And also, like, if this had happened even 100 years ago, the meteor would have been a sign of ill portent, and these would have just been goblins.
Right.
And then somebody would have found the newspaper report and been like, well, that's obviously a UFO.
Well, goblins are gnomes as well, because gnomes were also kind of like a commonly cited thing.
Absolutely. All the wee folk are basically like some kind of thing coming through. And this also, you remember I was talking about how some of the drawings had noses?
Uh-huh.
What if some of the people that saw these things saw noses?
Right.
Because what they're seeing is an entity, and the gap of what they're seeing is being filled in by their perception. So, like, some of them see a perfectly round head with these big yellow eyes, basically a real-life version of the Sableye, and then some of them see, like, the little dwarf dudes with the big noses, like, used to get reported in the 50s. And I'm just saying that, like, it's all a matter of your personal perception. You're all seeing something, but you're not seeing the same version of that something at the same time.
Right. And, you and I have talked about the web series Hellier before.
Absolutely.
And I feel like we could probably do an episode on that. But this also connects to this whole idea because they start off initially kind of investigating something similar to the Hopkinsville Goblins. But it kind of opens up to this larger super spectrum, and then talking about like how these things may alter their appearance. It gets into the Fey folk and everything like that. And it kind of culminates with this modern rite of Pan, which absolutely fascinating. And I just feel like we could probably do an entire discussion just on that because because they also bring in the Mothman. And, when we did our first episode together, I had talked about how, like, the Mothman seems to connect everything. And it's kind of the same thing. It's kind of the same thing with the Hopkinsville Kelly incident, is that, like, all of these things have this connection. So, it's just, if anyone listening hasn't seen Hellier, it's for free on YouTube. It's by Greg and Dana Newkirk of Planet Weird. Definitely worth watching. Like, it's like 16 episodes across 2 seasons. Very entertaining. Hell of a show. Very, very entertaining and very creepy at times. Very creepy.
It is. Now, I'm gonna say there were parts of it where I was like, "Come on, man," but it was definitely entertaining as all get out.
And I think they're working on a 3rd season, so hopefully we'll get some more updates.
I hope so.
Yeah, especially like maybe we'll be able to do a Hopkinsville update, depending on what they thought.
Oh, I'd love to. I kind of hope they go after the Jersey Devil. Like you were talking about the Mothman and the Jersey Devil being linked. One of the things I've been thinking about lately is there are these thin places in reality, like the tri-state area around Hopkinsville, like around Kentucky, West Virginia, that whole area is a thin place because there's so many things that happen there. There was a Kecksburg UFO crash, Mothman, Hopkinsville, all that stuff, and then you have, like, the Bridgewater Triangle.
Well, and then you also have all those cave systems in that area as well.
Absolutely.
Weird area.
Yeah, and just to let everybody know, we're going to do an episode on Skinwalker Ranch, me and Mike are. And David, if I could get you involved in that, that would be fantastic. I know you're probably interested in Skinwalker Ranch.
I'd be happy to be involved with that one. That one sounds like a lot of fun.
We're also kind of planning a live Halloween show with all the hosts if we can do that.
Oh,
that's kind of
that'd be really cool. Now,
yeah, that'd be great.
Now, I'm just kind of going over our notes real quick, and apparently Mike the Skeptic had an idea. What was his idea?
Alright, so I'm watching this video on YouTube about the Hopkinsville incident that covered pretty much all the ground we've covered. And Mike put forward this fantastic theory that some of the local kids knew about the Sutton family and decided they're going to play a prank on them. So they put on like these silver costumes made out of like buckets and stuff.
Like a washboard and everything like that.
Yeah, all that fun stuff. And come out of the woods. And they know that the family, because they're living on a farm, there's probably a lot of snakes. They've got all their guns loaded with rat shot. Which, I don't know if you're familiar with rat shot, but it's basically small pellets that isn't really going to hurt anything unless you hit a snake at point blank range.
Right.
It's basically just something to disintegrate a snake.
You know, get out of here, you varmint.
Yeah, get out. You darn varmint! I'm turning into Sam right now. I'm going to shut up. But the idea, Mike put forward the idea that what if it's just some kids playing a prank, knowing they keep their guns loaded with rat shot and they're not really going to get hurt. I was like, that's not a bad theory, to be honest.
So did the kids also throw like a tinfoil wrapped football with colored streamers over the house or something?
You know what? I don't know about that part. Mike didn't go over that part, but sure. We'll just throw that in there and say that Mike came up with that too. That there was a gay pride football thrown over the house, covered in Reynolds wrap.
Also, happy Pride to everyone.
Yes, absolutely. Happy Pride to everyone. We are totally down with whatever you're down with. Again, whatever you're into, deviantbehaviorradio.com supports you.
We share our love with all the gender fluid goblins.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, that's basically it. That's all we have on the Hopkinsville Goblins. Like, it's very well documented, but there's not a ton of variations in the documentation.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I love about it is there's not that much variation in it.
Mm-hmm. And then our source for the episode was a very, very, very thorough 200-something page document. So it's like almost like the authoritative eyewitness source of the encounter. So that's what we worked from here, and I think it worked out pretty well for us.
Absolutely. You did a fantastic job on your research this week. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Not bad for doing it a couple hours the night before.
Yeah, no kidding. You did an amazing job, and while we're talking about amazing, I want to thank all of the listeners out there. We have gotten such a positive response from this show. There are people been coming into my work telling me how much they've enjoyed the show.
Oh, that's cool.
And that blows my mind. You guys are just as amazing as this show. I truly appreciate it. I know that next week I'm going to get not Adam the Bastard. That's me. I'm Kevin the Bastard.
We're all bastards.
Yeah, we're going to get Clark Wayne on the show, and we're going to talk about ghost hunting, because he was a professional ghost hunter for 4 years.
Oh.
And we're going to talk about some ghost hunting, we're going to talk about ghosts in general, we're going to talk about some theories about where ghosts come from, and that's going to be pretty freaking cool, so I highly recommend you check that out. So, David, have you got anything to promote this week before we sign off?
So I'm going to be getting back into working on my comics soon enough. In the meantime, though, twice a week I am posting a werewolf adventure horror story. Little serial on Tapas. It's called Fang of Traceria. I'm sure you're going to be able to provide a link for it in your show notes or whatever.
Yes, send me a link and I will get that in the notes.
And then I post the updates as they come out. So if you follow me on Twitter at HP Comics, so that's H as in Harry, P as in Peter, K as in Kite, O as in Octopus, M as in Mark, I as in Intelligent, and C as in Comic. Oh, no, I'm sorry, K as in Comic. Wow, I messed that up. Follow me on Twitter.
HPKOMIC on Twitter.
Yes, that's it. Yeah. Just follow me on Twitter. You'll see I do all sorts of stuff. I post movie reviews and things like that. So.
Yeah, he's also covering a lot of stuff with The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs. So please check that out if you're a fan of The Last Drive-In. I know I am. I've always loved Joe Bob and everything he's done. So be sure to check that out. Of course, you can find me. We've got so much new news. We have a new website, which is supernaturalselectionpod.com. We have shirts available of the album art. We have one talking about the reptilian conspiracy. We have one with just the name using the font that we use, and we have some more shirts on the way. I'm going to be basing some on our episodes, like the Mothman episode is getting its own shirt, David.
Nice.
It's going to be Arving Mothman Attorney at Law. And the second episode, we're going to get one of just an alien sitting in a garbage can with a lid on its head saying, Gina left me. And the third episode will be Bob Lazar's head with lasers shooting out of his eyes. It just says Bob Laser. So be sure to check out those when they become available. We also have a Twitter account now, which is SupernatPod on Twitter. And if you look for Supernatural Selection on Facebook, you can find us there. So, and also, again, thank you for DeviantBehaviorRadio.com for being our major host and probably the coolest radio station you're ever going to hear. I'm also a DJ on there. You can check out my days on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays for an eclectic mix of amazing music. So, that being said, David, thank you again for coming on the show. You were like I said, the Jack Hanna of the series. I love having you on and us talking about crazy crap. Is there anything you want to talk about next time?
I'm up for just about anything, but I'll think about some topics. I'm always happy to talk about this stuff with you because we do it all the time anyway. So it's nice to just kind of record it. So
awesome.
I'll throw some episode ideas at you.
Awesome. I look forward to them. So, well, that's about it for this week. Thank you for listening, and stay frosty out there, everyone, and I will see you next time. Have a good one.
Supernatural Selection has been a production of DeviantBehaviorRadio.com. You can find it and more shows broadcast weekly at DeviantBehaviorRadio.com. Our theme music is Screensaver by Kevin MacLeod. It is used through Creative Commons license, and more of his music can be found at incompetech.filmmusic.io.